So we're going to sing the... Yeah, there's too many chairs. Thank you. Ye anilo prema dana karuna prachur karuna prachur he no prabhu kotagela Acharya Thakur Prabhu Kotagela Acharya Thakur Kahamora Swarup Rupa Ahasanatan Swarupa Sanatan Kahadasara Gunata Patita Pavan Patita Pavan Kamora Bhatta Yoga Kaha Kaviraj Bhatta Yoga Kaha Kaviraj Ekakare Kojangela Gaura Nataraj Gena Kota Nataraj Pasane Kujibo Mata Anale Pashivo Kujibo Nada Anale Pashivo Goranga Gunera Nidhi Kotagile Pavo Kotagile Pavo Se Sabha Sangira Sange Ye Koilo Vilash Sangira Sange Koilo Vilash Se Sangana Paya Kande Narotamadas Napayande Narotamadas Ye anilo premadana Karuna prachur Karuna prachur Heno Prabhu Kotagela Acharya Thakur Kotagela Acharya Thakur Jaya Acharya Thakur Jaya Acharya Thakur Jaya Charya Thakur Jaya Charya Thakur Thakur Jaya Charya Thakur Jaya Charya Thakur Jaya Charya Thakur Haribo 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 Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. He who brought the treasure of divine love and who was filled with compassion and mercy, where has such a personality as Srinivasacharya gone? Where are my Swarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatana? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopala Bhatta, and where is Krishna Das Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against the rock and enter into the fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all these devotees in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottama Das simply weeps. Om Jnanatinamandasya Gunamjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachanine Ne Vishesha Sunyavari Pashyata Deshatarine Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Guru Krishna Das Goswami Niti Namine Namo Hamsanikashaya Prabhupada Priyayate Sudriya Sudi Nisyam Bhamtasha Bhaktinuvarine. Hare Krishna. Today is the disappearance day of Srila Sanatana Goswami. And also today is the disappearance day of another great Vaishnava that we actually had the pleasure of knowing in this particular lifetime, which is Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj Goswami. That was in, I believe, 2020. Yeah. Okay. Personally speaking, I can say I didn't really have that much association with Bhakti Charu Swami, but I had enough to know that he was a extremely exalted and saintly personality, much like we'll hear from about Sanatana Goswami today. And when he left, there was actually like a palpable feeling of separation. Like there was actually, like that song, you could really understand what it meant in some fashion. I mean, he, again, I didn't have that much association with him, but he was here several times and had some. Yeah, I thought it was 2020. Yeah, it was right after COVID had started. Yeah, it was right after COVID started. So it's been a few years, and it doesn't get any easier, I'll say. You know, when you lose a Vaishnava of that caliber who, you know, just by the mere sight of, all sins go far away, you know, by the mere, when you hear like his bhajan, you know, I'll never forget the first time I actually heard him in person. He came here and he was singing the bhajan after greeting, and it was the Madhurastikam, and it was like, you know, when somebody with that sort of purity and, you know, he was just such a wonderful, exalted, erudite, scholarly Vaishnava. When someone like that, you hear from someone like that, not only the class, I don't even remember the class very much, but just him singing, just pouring his heart out to the deities and talking about how beautiful Krishna was, and, you know, just this sort of voice that's from another realm, you know, that's what it felt like. It was like hearing this voice from, you know, the heavenly planets, and just was transportative to other places, so you couldn't really expect to stay in this material realm when you were around such a personality, which is the case with pure devotees. You know, that's what, you know, that's the thing that everyone strives for who isn't a pure devotee, such as myself, to have that association or be gifted with that kind of just small association and little bit of insight, you know, that sort of personality can bring about great realization and also just a higher level of consciousness for the neophytes. So just wanted to mention that it is also his disappearance day today, and there will be different celebrations around our movement, and even tonight there will be some devotees gathering here at 6:30, I believe, to just honor him and, you know, offer flowers to him. And if you can read about, or at least hear this, hear some of his bhajans, it's very transformative. He's just a very saintly personality. So with that, just wanted to speak a little about Sanatana Goswami, although there's volumes, and as Mother Krishna Priya said, you could probably go on for 5 days in a discourse speaking about so many things with Sanatana Goswami. So many of us know Sanatana Goswami and his brother Rupa were very, very close associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They also had another brother, Anupama, who wasn't really so much in the picture. But Sanatana Goswami was actually 5 years older than Rupa Goswami, and he was a main associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So much so that, I mean, that was his spiritual master, basically. He took all of his orders from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and went through great struggles to try to get his association as well. And just to give a little bit of back history about Sanatana Goswami, he and his brothers were born in a place, or stayed in a place called Ramakeli, and somehow or other they came into the fold of the Muslim government at the time, who employed them in various ways. Actually, Sanatana Goswami was sort of the private secretary of the Muslim ruler. And so he was a close associate, basically, of this Muslim ruler, and even had his name changed. The last name was Malik, which sort of means, I'm sorry? Shakima? Well, no, after he changed his name. And Malik was like the name given to like a lord or somebody of a very high caliber in the Muslim government. So he was given that name, and a lot of faith and trust was put in him with the affairs of the government, as well as his brother Rupa, who was the treasurer. He took care of all the money. He was very expert at that. And Sanatana Goswami was a main advisor of the Muslim ruler at the time, Hussein Shah. And, you know, that's how his life went for a very long time, until he and his brothers were actually able to have the darshan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was actually touring around. And he was able to, you know, understand that, oh, this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because actually they were born in a Vaishnava family. It's just through circumstance and association and so many things that happened that he ended up taking employment from the Muslim government, but he was never like converted. So they were always Vaishnavas, and when they saw Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they could understand that, okay, this was the, you know, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the head of the Gaudiya, you know, Vaishnavas and like that. So they could understand that he was the person that they wanted to have the association from the most. And actually, it was a little bit easier for Rupa Goswami to get free of his appointment with the government. He was able to somehow or other, get out of it to some degree without too much notice. Although, of course it's notice, but not like it was with Sanatana Goswami. So at the point that Sanatana Goswami decided that he needed to have the association of Lord Chaitanya and was told, come and meet him, he had to get out of his appointment as well. And so he just simply pretended he was sick and he was bedridden and he was at home and he didn't want to be, talked to or bothered. And finally, since he was a close advisor to the Muslim king or Muslim ruler, and they were on a very friendly level. The king was missing Sanatana Goswami's association and sent someone to his house to find out why he wasn't, coming to work, why he wasn't talking to the king. And the person reported back to the king that, oh, he's in fine health, he's just there, he's hanging out at home. And then the king, was obviously furious because this guy had sort of just, ghosted him a little bit and had him thrown in jail. So then he was, incarcerated for some period of time. But of course that didn't stop Sanatana Goswami because he was determined to make it to his worshipable Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It was kind of like love at first sight, When you see, like with Bhakti Charaswami, when you see a pure devotee, you see somebody, obviously in this case it was another level because it was Lord Chaitanya, but when you see somebody like that, you just are impelled to have their association, to hear from them, to want to, take instruction from them, to want to, be in the kirtan with them, everything, all the things. And so he was able to bribe, with some money that his brother Rupa had left for him, he was able to bribe his jailer to let him out. So then he was accompanied by an assistant, his name was Ishan, to go over the mountains and to find Lord Chaitanya, who was far away. And Ishan, was helping him along, and they had some gold that they were using to get through. So with great trial and tribulation, and even at risk of their own lives, they traveled to where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was waiting for them. They didn't know he was waiting for them at the time, but they were trying to seek his association. Even to the point that, basically when Sanatana Goswami reached the place of Lord Chaitanya, he had to, he looked like a mendicant. He was just like a beggar. Whereas formerly he and Rupa, it said they were rich, they were wealthy beyond anybody's imagination, because they were doing all the service for the ruler, and the king was, gifting them all the time and paying them well, and, they were sort of the in crowd with the king. So by the time he, broke out of jail, then he's a fugitive, right? Then he's staying at a, as he's making his way, he had to stay somewhere. So he stayed at an inn. Like there were so many inns in the mountains where people, maybe run by a husband and wife or somebody would just open up a large facility, or not even a large facility, just something where people can come and stay, more like a bed and breakfast. And he stayed there, and the shopkeeper could understand that he was, wealthy, and was gonna just kill him and rob him, because that's how it went at the ends. It wasn't like, a chain where everybody knew everybody. It was just sort of a small place where somebody could crash for a night or two. And somehow or the other, he got out of that by just giving the shopkeeper all the gold, although his assistant had kept back a little bit for emergencies, because he was tasked to help him across this huge mountain range. And then at that point in time, when he was nearing the place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed, he was pretty much destitute. He was starving, he was sick, he was most likely dehydrated, he was wearing rags, but, for all intents and purposes, except for he did have a very nice woolen chadar, like a super nice chadar. So when he showed up to the doorstep of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, someone answered the door, his assistant answered the door, and saw Sanatana Goswami standing there, who looked like, wild mountain man with, just all, I thought he was a Muslim, and, plus he was just disheveled, and he was sick, and he was just all the things. So he, quickly shut the door, and because Lord Chaitanya had told him, go answer the door, there's a Vaishnava at the door, and then he opened the door, and it was apparently this disheveled, crazy-looking sort of Muslim personality. And the assistant shut the door quickly and went back and was like, I don't think that's a devotee. And Lord Chaitanya was like, no, it is. And so he went out to receive himself, which, we've been there. Somebody may not appear like a devotee, and we never know. Everybody's a devotee, practically speaking. So then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced Sanatana Goswami very heartily, because then he was also reunited with his very wonderful associate. And just as a side note, in Krishna Lila, Srila Sanatana Goswami was Labanga Manjari. So he was actually helping to arrange pastimes of Radha and Krishna. He's a very intimate associate of Radha Krishna, along with his brothers. So he embraced Sanatana Goswami, he took him in, and basically he was nursed back to health in some fashion. He had to take a few days to regroup. And then when he was kind of, together, he was better, he was rested. There's just so many things that happened at that point, but then finally he was in the association with of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu again. So a few points to touch on, pertinent points with Sanatana Goswami that we can already see. Sanatana Goswami he's known as, and he's called the Sambandha Acharya, which means he's like, through his worship of a particular deity in Vrindavan, he is able to, even now, help us understand our friendship with Krishna, our relationship with Krishna, how we are, connected to Krishna in some fashion, Just the preliminary connection with Krishna, the Sambandha Acharya gives through his teachings and through his example, how we should approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how we should relate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the deity. Obviously the deity form is Krishna, but he had a lot of examples throughout his life. And I'll read some things that we can all understand, that he was a wonderful sort of example for all of us. And, he is in our line of acharyas and has written so many books on the subject matter, but just in his dealings in life with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's like, tries his best to be just a very humble and unassuming best friend who wants to do everything for the pleasure of the Lord, even at the expense of personal comforts and making a lot of personal sacrifice. I mean, we've already seen that he was so determined to be with Lord Chaitanya that he had to figure out some way to get out of jail and pass through all these sort of mountain ranges. I'm sure there was all kind of, animals and other dacoits, and, that was a popular place, the mountains and the ocean, but the mountains were a popular place as people were crossing over to try to, rob, gather resources, maybe even take over fire or a dwelling on the way. So, he just very peacefully and humbly, gave all of his gold to the shopkeep and, appeared as sort of somebody else that you might see in the mountains, another sort of a dacoits, and, not intentionally, but that's just, he wasn't really concerned with that appearance. And, finally, when he came to Lord Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya is so magnanimous that regardless of appearance or sickness or so many things, and even, later on, you can see Sanatana Goswami was just very humble about the whole thing, and he just wanted to serve. He just came there to serve Lord Chaitanya and to try and help him in his mission, actually. So just a couple things that of note. When Lord Chaitanya made it, when Sanatana Goswami made it to Vrindavan, immediately he sort of put himself under the shelter of Lord Chaitanya and was asking, what can I do? How can you please engage me? How can I serve you? And that's when actually Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered the brothers, because he was also reunited with Rupa at that point. Rupa had seemingly had a little bit of an easier time reaching Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that's when he ordered the brothers, to... So here's the 4 things. Move to Vrindavan and perform 4 services. Uncover Sri Krishna's pastime places. Install deities and arrange for their puja. Compile bhakti scriptures and propagate the rules of devotional life. And they were wholly and solely focused on that throughout their whole lifetime. We know a little bit about his very luminous and illustrious brother, Rupa Goswami. And Srila Sanatana Goswami tended to be a little bit less luminous in the association of the Vaishnavas. He was one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, but he tended to be a little bit more low-key. So when Lord Chaitanya ordered them to go to Vrindavan, they actually traveled there and began to go on Braj Mandal Parikram extensively, so they could uncover these places where Radha and Krishna had their pastimes while on the planet. And they didn't have any place to stay, so they just sort of were going to all these notable places, noting it down, and they didn't really sleep very much. They just sort of begged alms or begged chapatis like that. They didn't really, this is mendicants in the true sense of the word, or renunciants in the true sense of the word. They didn't really have a fixed residence. They didn't have, any luxuries. They just sort of dove right into what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted, which is a huge change, at some point, and, maybe we've been there, 1 week, everything's great. There's, money in the bank. There's plenty of food in the fridge. There's a roof over the head. And then all of a sudden, all that's gone. But they chose to be finished with that because, of course, we know it's only temporary. And then at some point in time, through writing bhakti scriptures and also worshiping, deities, he actually established the Radha Madana Mohan Mandir. And that actually was the first mandir that was open in Vrindavan by the six Goswamis. He actually began this worship in earnest, as was instructed, and made a real friendship with the deity of Madana Mohan. And particularly Madana Mohan means Krishna who is indescribably so beautiful that he attracts Cupid. So he was worshiping him with one-pointed devotion. And of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, saw this. So much so, he could feel it, right? And Srila Sanatana Goswami, meanwhile, was just in a very humbly way worshiping the deity, because he didn't really have very much opulence, like we do here. So he was actually begging, going around in the town and begging for wheat flour, just to roll into a ball with some Jamuna water and put in coals to make like just a bread ball, like a cooked bread ball. That's what he was cooking. That's what he was making for the deity, offering to the deity. No salt, nothing. And he actually spent 43 years in that way, wandering from village to village, ascertaining these pastimes. And also, when he was going from village to village, he was also befriending these Brajabasis, because he was in this sambandha mood. He was in this sort of friendly, exchange and also concern. And he actually, at each village when he came, he was very affectionate toward these Brajabasis, and he listened to all their problems, and he helped them overcome different obstacles in their practices, and also even in their practical life. Like, if they were having family dispute or, increasing crop yields or, things around, the abode, keeping animals at bay. So he actually was like friend making, he was going around and friend making in Vrindavan as well. And that was his life for many, many years, apart from his, of course, studying and writing. He wrote many literatures. We know of several. I was reading one last night called the Krishna Lila Stava, which is basically it's a prayer compendium to the 10th canto, I'll say. So in each, and it's arranged in 108, he calls it 108 obeisances. And each one of them has some prayer about that's corresponding with the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very beautiful. And then there's his Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which maybe, I don't know if you've read, or I'm sure everyone's heard about if you haven't read, which is also it's interesting. It's sort of another snapshot into a friend of Krishna, this Gopakumar, who, Krishna's his good friend, and he's very concerned about who is serving him and who's the best servant for him, who's serving him the best, who's serving him the most. And in this Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which is quite luminous, he goes through so many planetary systems, talks to so many different personalities, and each one of them that he meets, this Gopakumar, says, "Oh no, I'm not the best. I'm not the best devotee of Krishna. I'm not the best of anything. I'm just here." So when he's having read that and heard about it so much since then, and I know some of you have probably read it numerous times, that's what it feels like. Maybe Sanatana Goswami was, and this is all conjecture, but projecting that thing, because Sanatana Goswami wants to serve Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so bad. He's his Lord, and when you're very concerned with the Lord, that's all you can think about. You can only think about every little aspect of how they will be served the best flowers, the best boga, the best outfits, the best paraphernalia, and how all those little parts and pieces are going to move to make it the best. I can attest it's a deep absorption, and it's also causes a lot of anxiety, because if you're thinking about the pleasure of the Lord, as Sanatana Goswami was, then you want everything to be the best. And then at some point, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited him, and it's a wonderful pastime where he actually gave Sanatana Goswami a Govardhan Shila, because Sanatana Goswami was, going around Govardhan practically all the time. He was constantly on Parakram. He was constantly going through the villages. He didn't really stop very much, and he was just always moving in the service of Krishna. So then he had his own worshipful Shila that he was caring for very lovingly until the end of his life, actually. And in the same way, very humble way, he was serving that Shila while he was writing all of his instructions. Another notable instruction for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas is the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which we don't read that much, and it's really, 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 really strict. And Prabhupada, he wasn't that strict with us, thankfully. He was a lot more lenient about and understanding about our challenges in Kali Yuga. So he wasn't prohibiting as much as in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, but at the time when there was so many Gaudiya Vaishnavas that were not being respected, or maybe that weren't respectable, to try to make everything so it was paka, it was pure, it was pleasing for the most part to Krishna. He actually was trying to espouse that culture as well, so that could be included. And we know in Krishna consciousness there's Prabhupada gave us just chant 16 rounds and follow the 4 regulative principles and be happy. That was all he said. He made it very simple for the simple. But there's varying degrees of that worship. There's varying degrees of that practice. And, I can't really say for sure if not eating carrots will make me more Krishna conscious, although that's what the Hari Bhakti Vilas says. But maybe. But we can understand even from those examples that, there are varying levels of for ourselves as practitioners to elevate our consciousness so we can better understand what's pleasing to the Lord, so we can be more of a pure deliverer of the messages of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada. And of course, Sanatana Goswami, aka Lavanga Manjari, was the purest that, there was, particularly at the time. So for him to talk to everybody about these, especially in Braj Mandal, talk to everybody about the instructions to serve the Lord the best, and bring the consciousness up in that way. That's what an acharya does. And then just one nice, a couple pastimes for Srila Sanatana Goswami. If we ever visit Braj Mandal, we can see a lot of the places where he sat, and he was in bhajan, and he was also praying for the fallen conditioned souls as well. But there is just a couple of pastimes which are very sweet. And these are the Bhakti Ratnakara. One day Sanatana Goswami went to Radhakund to see Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath Das Goswami. When they saw Sanatana approaching, they rose to offer him respect and then offered him a seat. With this, the three of them began an istagosti, and Srila Rupa Goswami had written a stotram to Radharani called Chatu Pushpanjali, an offering of flowers. Srila Sanatana Goswami read the verses and was struck by one in particular. O Vrindavaneshwari, I offer my respects unto you. Because your complexion is like newly molten gold, you are known as Gaurangi. Your dress is beautiful like that of a blue lotus. Your long braid of hair resembles a black serpent decorated with jewels. When Sanatana Goswami saw the line, your braided hair resembles a black serpent, he thought about this comparison and said, is this a logical or reasonable metaphor to compare Radharani's hair to a serpent? That afternoon, Sri Sanatan went to Radhakund to take his bath. After offering different reverential prayers to the Radhakund, he took his bath there. At that time, a little distance from the kund, he could see some gopi girls playing at the foot of some trees. As he glanced in their direction, he could just make out that right behind the head of one girl's was what might have been a long, black, dangling braid, but looked to Sanatana Goswami much more like a deadly snake, swaying back and forth as if ready to strike. At that time, he called out, "Oh, young girl! Be careful, there is a snake creeping up on your back." The young girl, caught up in the joy of her playing, took no notice. Apparently she couldn't hear him. Thereupon he went running up to her and saw that the girl was none other than Sri Radharani, Thakurani. When the gopis and gopas saw him, they burst out laughing. They laughed and laughed for some time without stopping. Sri Sanatana Goswami was struck dumbfounded. After this, he could understand the logic of Sri Rupa Goswami's metaphor. Just very innocent, just a very innocent exchange, but very telling. Again, Sri Sanatana Goswami, he's just a very humble servant of the Lord. And then once, Sri Sanatana Goswami was alone in a forest on the banks of the Pavana Sarovara, performing his bhajan in a secluded place. He had been fasting from food and drink, and as he thought he is the super soul in all living beings, the Lord could understand everything. He thought, my devotee is starving, I cannot tolerate this. In the dress of a gopa, Krishna entered the forest where Sanatana was staying, carrying a pot of milk. He came before Sanatana and said, Baba, I have brought you some milk. Sanatana said, why have you brought me milk? You are not eating properly, that's why, Baba. How did you know that I am not eating anything? Many gopas have come and gone by here. They told me you have not been eating. Why didn't they come? They have much work at home, so they sent me, Baba. You are such a little boy. Why have you taken so much trouble for me? No, Father, it is no trouble at all. Taking the pot of milk, Sanatana says, sit down, little boy. I will finish the milk and give you back your pot. No, Baba, I cannot sit with you. I have to milk the cows. I will come and fetch the pot tomorrow. Saying this, the boy vanished, and Sri Sanatana became speechless. He could understand that this was the work of Krishna. He began to drown in the tears that poured from his eyes as he drank the milk. From that day on, he ate by practicing madhukari, or only accepting a tiny bit from many different residents of Vrindavan. Gradually, the residents of Vrindavan built him a kutir so he could stay there. So that's Krishna telling us, don't torture our bodies. We have to keep it up if we're going to do his service and be in bhajan. And then also we've heard the famous story about how he was preparing sweet rice. Rupa Goswami, he wanted to prepare sweet rice for Sanatan but didn't have the provisions. And then Srimati Radharani herself understood this and She dressed up like a gopi and brought milk, rice, and sugar to Rupa Goswami, saying, Swamiji, Swamiji, I have brought you a gift of uncooked rice. Please accept it. So, she didn't know, or he didn't know, and he was sort of like, why have you taken this trouble? And she's like, Baba, it's no trouble. I have come to render a humble service to a saintly person. So she could also understand, we can understand by that action that this is a very saintly personality. So there's a lot more, and it could be another 5 days because there is a lot more. But there's many, many wonderful pastimes of Sanatana Goswami when the Lord is reciprocating with him, his humble servant. So thank you for hearing attentively. He's definitely someone we should aspire to serve the Lord in his mood. Srila Sanatana Goswami ki jai.
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Enam Kanvantam Maravindanalaya Taksham Bharavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Akom Vitamaniya Vishesha Shobha. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Angani Yasa Sakale Priya Priti Manti Vasyan Vipan Vikayanti Chiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham.
Krishna Kirtana Gana Nardana Paro Prema Rita Bonidhi Dira Dira Jana Priya Priya Karo Nirmatsaro Pujito Krishna Kirtana Gana Nardana Paro Prema Rita Bonidhi Dira Dira Jana Priya Priya Karo Nirmatsaro Pujito Sri Chaitanya Kripa Baro Bhuvi Bhuvo Bharavahantarako Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Sri Jiva Gopalago Sri Chaitanya Kripa Baro Bhuvi Bhuvo Bharavahantarako Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Sri Jiva Gopalago Together Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipuno Sadharma Samristipo Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Saranyakaro Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nandena Mataliko Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Sri Jiva Gopalago Shri Gauranga Gunanuvana Navido Shraddha Samridhyan Vido Papotapa Nikrintanu Danu Britam Govinda Ganamritai Ananda Murivadanaika Nipuno Kavalyanistarako Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Sri Jiva Gopalago Tyakta Turnama Shesha Mandalapati Shrinim Sadatu Chavat Budvadina Ganesa Kau Karunaya Kaupina Kanta Srita Gopi Bhavarasamrita Divilahari Kalola Magna Mohor Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Sri Jiva Gopalago Sankhya Purvaka Namagana Nativi Kalavasani Krito Nidrahara Vihara Kari Vijito Chatyanta Dino Chayo Radha Krishna Guna Smritir Madrimuna Nandena Samohito Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Sri Jiva Gopalago Kuja kokilaham sasara sagana Kirne mayura kule Nana ratna nibada mula vitapa Shri Yukta Vrindavane Radha Krishna Mahanisham Prabhajato Jivarta Doya Muda Vandirupa Sanatana Raghuyugo Shri Diva Gopalango Radha Kunda Tate Kalinda Nayana Tire Chavam Sivate Preman Madhava Sada Shesha Dashaya Grasta Brahmato Sada Gayanto Chakada Herer Gunavaram Bhava Vibhuta Mura Vandirupa Sanatana Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopalago He Radhe Braja Devi Ke Chalalite He Nanda Suna Kuta Shri Govardhana Kalpa Parapadale Kalindri Vane Kuta Gosanta Viti Sarvato Brajapure Kedar Mahavivalo Vandirupa Sanatano Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopalago Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Goloka Nanda Radha Goloka Nanda Shri Radhe Radha Goloka Nanda Shri Radhe Jaya Radha Goloka Nanda Radha Goloka Nanda Shri Radhe Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Jaya Goswami Maharaj Jaya Goswami Maharaj Jaya Goswami Maharaj Jaya Goswami Maharaj Goswami Maharaj Jaya Goswami Maharaj Jaya Goswami Maharaj Jaya Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya 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 Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev I offer my respectful obeisances under the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, who are always engaged in chanting the holy name of Krishna and dancing. They are just like the ocean of love of God, and they are popular both with the gentle and with the ruffians, because they are not envious of anyone. Whatever they do, they are all pleasing to everyone, and they are fully blessed by Lord Chaitanya. Thus they are engaged in missionary activities meant to deliver all the consistent souls in the material universe. I offer my respectful obeisances under the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the 3 worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of, because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. I offer my respectful obeisances under the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very much enriched in understanding of Lord Chaitanya, and who are thus expert in narrating his transcendental qualities, purification souls from the reactions of their sinful activities by pouring upon them transcendental songs about Govinda. As such, they are very expert in increasing the limits of ocean of transcendental bliss, and they are the saviors of the living entities from the devouring mouth of liberation. I offer my respectful obeisances under the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who kicked off all association of aristocracy as insignificant. In order to deliver the poor conditioned souls, they accepted loincloths and treating themselves as mendicants, but they are always merged in the ecstatic ocean of the gopis' love for Krishna and bathe always and repeatedly in the waves of that ocean. I offer my respectful obeisances under the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are always engaged in worshiping Radha Krishna in the transcendental land of Vrindavan, where there are beautiful trees full of fruits and flowers, which have under their roots all valuable jewels. The Goswamis are perfectly competent to bestow upon the living entities the greatest boon of the goal of life. I offer my respectful obeisances under the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Das Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are engaged in chanting the holy names of the Lord and bowing down in a scheduled measurement. In this way, they utilize their valuable lives. In executing these devotional activities, they conquered over eating and sleeping, and were always meek and humble, enchanted by the remembering the transcendental qualities of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisances under the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who were sometimes on the bank of the Radhakund Lake or the shores of the Jamuna, and sometimes at Bamsi Bhat. There they appeared just like madmen in the full ecstasy of love of Krishna, exhibiting different transcendental symptoms in their bodies, and they were immersed in the ecstasy of Krishna consciousness. I offer my respectful obeisances under the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, who were chanting very loudly everywhere in Vrindavan, shouting, "Queen of Vrindavan, Radharani, O Lalita, O son of Nanda Maharaj, where are you all now? Are you just on the hill of Govardhan? Are you under the tree on the bank of the Jamuna? Where are you?" These were their moods in executing Krishna consciousness. Srila Sanatana Goswami ki jai. Srila Srinivasa Acharya ki jai. Okay.
Vijavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipanam Pranamrita Swadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis